It could be a single dime, or it could be a ship out on the water. But to me it's just more time. A time for the one who moved 100 mountains. Time for the one who broke 1,000 chains. For the love of a son and a mother. Little girl, sweet as sugar cane. What is love? Love could be a river. Love's a single drop of rain. But to her, love is forever. Love's a mention of your name. What is love? There's more than just one answer. Love's a golden wedding ring. If only love would be the cure for cancer, then the world would hear you sing. What is faith? Faith is believing. Faith can tell you where to go. You say faith, it'll move 1,000 mountains. Faith can liberate your soul. A heart of gold will take you to the rafters, where you get your angel wings. Don't cry for me, all the words that are coming from your golden guitar strings. What is life? There could be a million. What is love? There's more than just one answer. What is faith? Well, faith is believing. Faith's believing.
Good morning, everybody. We are in week 4 of the alternate schedule with coronavirus and all that stuff. So once again, coming to you on the live stream from down here at the church building. Hope everybody's doing well. We've had way more requests for people looking to help folks than we have people needing help. So as far as this little organization goes, we've really been the church out there in the world. You know, there's people that are all the time texting and calling and saying, hey, you know, I've got a little extra time. If you know that somebody that doesn't need to get out and go to the store, I'd be happy to go get them groceries or whatever. Way more offers to help than we've had people that are in a bind needing help. We have been helping a lot of them, you know, that whether we have an alternative schedule or whether we're here meeting on Sunday, it doesn't change how the way we ought to be living our life out there in the world every day. So that's been rolling along real good. Everything else, we're just kind of waiting and seeing. You know, the updates on what's going on with our government and stuff are coming in, but a lot of people don't really know the exact details. So we're just kind of wait and see. You know, as long as we know that this is just temporary, then we're going to try to comply and be respectful with our leaders in this country. If it was to change and try to be anything other than temporary, I would feel extremely different about that, and I think y'all would too. But obviously, President Trump originally spoke about having this whole deal done by Easter, and I'm all for Easter. I'm all for families getting together and spending time with each other, and anything that unifies families and brings them closer together. I think it's a great thing. Obviously, last week we talked a little bit about Easter. There are some pagan influences in Easter. The actual name comes from a goddess of sex and fertility, which is why we have rabbits and eggs and all that other stuff that came around. All that happened back during the Roman Empire many centuries ago, where they were trying to figure out how to get the Christians and the pagans and everybody to quit arguing and stuff like that. So we understand that there's some things about it that don't really apply to us, but aren't necessarily bad, depending on how you do it. I'm more concerned about Resurrection Sunday and celebrating the fact that Jesus came up out of the tomb and is still alive. The significance of that is everything when we look at, like last week we talked about Passover, and we talked about how he had the Passover dinner and then he was crucified on Passover. Passover Day was the day of preparation for the Feast of Unleavened Bread. So he would have been crucified on a Wednesday. The Thursday would have been the high day. We'll talk about that in a minute in John. Friday would have been a normal day where they would have prepared spices and stuff. And then Saturday would have been the weekly Sabbath. Sunday morning, we'll see that Mary went to the tomb early before the sun was up, and he was already out and gone. So we definitely, that's a powerful thing that does not rotate. Okay, so Easter, it changes every year. One year it's the 12th, one year it's the 20th, one year it's the 18th, however that falls. Passover is the same every year. So the resurrection day from Passover would be the same every year also. So I look more at that significance because of what he did for us. I was having a conversation with a couple guys earlier this week, and Lord brought something back to my memory that I hadn't thought about in a while. These two guys, their dad and I are also good friends, and we were talking, and I said, your dad said something really powerful to me years ago, because their dad is a supervisor at a very large corporation, and he has several hundred people underneath his supervision that he watches over. So I said, I was talking to your dad about church, what we call church, what we see as church, and having the organization and stuff. And I asked him, I said, with you being a supervisor of all these people at this big corporation, you have a set of skills that is needed for administration and stuff. How come you have never been involved in the leadership of this group? And he didn't even blink. He said, because I don't want to know what goes on behind the curtain. And I didn't really understand what he meant. At the time he said, it clicked with me, behind the curtain, Wizard of Oz, and the man behind the curtain and all that stuff. That makes sense. But I didn't really know what he meant as far as behind the curtain of the institution. That just didn't really fit. But I was involved in the leadership of that organization, and as I was around it for a few years, I started to see what he was talking about the things that happened behind the curtain. And so anyways, I was talking to these two guys, and I was telling them about, the wisdom that their dad had given me. And that got me to thinking about this week, Resurrection Sunday. Jesus died to get rid of the curtain, period. That there was no veil in between man and God anymore. And as I started digging on that, We're going to be mainly in Matthew and John today. We'll be in Matthew 27 and John 19. We're going to kind of flip-flop back and forth because it's a good idea to read the different accounts from different people's perspectives. Okay? Matthew was a tax collector. He was a professional kind of guy. He was used to keeping up with numbers and details and all that type of stuff. And you see that in the way that he recounts the story of Jesus. John, on the other hand, would have been a young man, probably teenage years in that area, still kind of an adolescent young man. You know, when we see the Last Supper, we see him leaning over on Jesus' shoulder. Well, that'd be kind of funny if a 30-year-old man was leaning on a 30-year-old man, but it's not funny if a 16-year-old man, 17-year-old young man was leaning on the shoulder of Jesus. You know, we see differences in the way they acted and the way they perceive things. And we also see differences in the way John interacts with, he acts more like a young man that is trying to find his way. He's not near as bold as Peter, but he's a little bit more set back, but he's a little bit more loving, a little bit more tender, but not as calloused as men have a tendency to be, you know, as we get older, that type of stuff. So when we're looking in Matthew chapter 27, verse 50, we get to the point where Jesus has been crucified. He's hanging on the cross. And verse 50 says, and Jesus cried out again with a loud voice and yielded up his spirit. So he dies. Then, behold, the veil of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. The earth quaked and the rocks were split and so on and so forth. It goes into great detail. The reason that that's important is the veil of the temple separated God's presence from man. And only the high priest could go in once a year to make sacrifices inside there. And if he had anything out of line, God would kill him as soon as he came in. Jesus fulfilled everything through his death, burial, and resurrection. So that the veil was torn so that we freely have access. We don't have to go through a priest. You don't have to come down here and have me pray for you. You know, your prayers are just as powerful as mine. The only reason people think that somebody else's prayers would be better is because they don't know them as well as they know themselves. That's it. You know, if you knew you as well as I know me, you wouldn't think mine are any more special than yours are. Now, we can, as brothers and sisters, combine our faith together and pray for each other to help each other, strengthen each other, so on and so forth. That's very important. But not like a priest, I need you to pray for me because my prayers aren't good enough type thing. The Bible says that Jesus is our intercessor, period. You don't need an intercessor anymore. The other thing that I wanted to start pointing out is everything that Jesus did all the way through his life, death, crucifixion, resurrection, everything. Every little detail had a big purpose. And if you'll take little details and go back into the Old Testament that were the types and shadows of leading up to Jesus, you'll find why he did the certain things that he did. It's a really important little piece to understand why Jesus did, because Jesus didn't have a pattern. Okay, Jesus did not leave us a map. He left us a guide. He gave us his spirit, not his system. Big difference. Man has tried to make a system. And Jesus said, forget the system, follow me. So here's your guide to do that. That's why we have the Holy Spirit. That's why he guides us, all that type of stuff. One of the things right there in Matthew chapter 27, if you jump back up to verse 45, it says, now from the 6th hour until the 9th hour, there was darkness all over the land. And about the 9th hour, Jesus cried out with a loud voice, saying, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. That is, my God, why have you forsaken me? Now, a lot of people just take that at face value. They just grab a hold of that, take it at face value, and, well, God forsook Jesus, you know, and all that stuff. To a Jew that heard that, you have to listen to it from their perspective. Flip over to Psalms 22. And I'll show you. From their perspective, that would have meant something. If I was to sing the first couple verses of a popular song, like if I was to say, "Big wheels keep on turning, carrying me home to see my kin," most of y'all would be able to just pick right up and start singing "Sweet Home Alabama" by Leonard Skinner and know what I was talking about. So Jesus was quoting something out of Psalms 22. It says, Psalms 22 is the suffering, praise, and posterity, which is the lineage of the Messiah, to the chief musician, set to the deer of the dawn, a psalm of David. So this was a song set to a tune. First words, my God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from helping me? Why, and from the words of my groaning. Oh my God, I cry in the daytime, but you do not hear. He was quoting something that David had written that the Jewish people would sing about. Okay? If we go all the way through there, down to verse 16, it says, the dogs have surrounded me. The congregation of the wicked has enclosed me. They pierced my hands and my feet. I can count all of my bones. They look and stare at me. They divide my garments among them. For my clothing they cast lots. This was a song that David wrote 1,000 years before Jesus ever showed up. So Jesus was quoting something, and to Jewish people, especially Jewish leaders that were crucifying him, the ones that were behind killing him, when he quoted the beginning verse of that song, they knew exactly what he was talking about. And then when they knew all these other words and they saw it in real life of what they had done, then all of a sudden it got real. It became an instant, oh my gosh, we've caused this, we've created this, we've fulfilled this, that it brings back to memory, that type of stuff. So when we look through Jesus' death, and this time of year, because we remember it, we need to pick up on all the little details of things that have happened and what he did and why he did what he did. Flip over to John chapter 19, and we'll look at a little bit over there, because there's so many little details, and I don't have time to go into all of them, because I really try to keep these little deals short, because I'd rather give y'all a lot of little pieces and then y'all go dig. Okay, I think it's very important, especially parents, for the kids to see their parents digging, and then the parents to be teaching their children. That's the way we're supposed to do. And if we're all caught up in hunting Easter eggs and we totally forget the reason about resurrection and what he's done for us, it does us no good. The simple fact of the matter is Christians have become so passive about their own Christianity. If people were praying at home the way we should have been praying at home decades earlier, the government would have never taken prayer out of schools. It wouldn't have even been an issue. But because Christians weren't doing what they should have been doing, it just kind of slipped on out the door and nobody noticed. Nobody did anything about it. So I going through John chapter 19, I'm just going to give you a little bit of things. Y'all go dig on them on your own. Like always, if you need help, you got questions, whatever, call me. I'm always available for that. But if we go down to John chapter 19, verse 17, okay? Verse 17 says, and he, bearing his cross, talking about Jesus, went out to a place called the place of a skull, which is called in Hebrew Golgotha, where they crucified him. Now, that's another one of those little things that's real easy to just skip over. Take it at face value and jump on past. When you ask the question, why was it called the place of the skull? And why was it called Golgotha? The same guy that wrote Hebrews 22 that we just read a second ago was David, who killed Goliath. And if you go back to 1 Samuel chapter 17, you can read about he killed Goliath. He didn't have, people say all the time he had a slingshot. They didn't have latex rubber back then, okay? He had a sling. It was a piece of leather on the end of two strings. One string ties around your finger, the other string you hold, and that piece of leather, you put a rock in it. And as you swing it around your head, you release that one string and the other one's still around your finger, so it releases the rock at a really high speed, and then you hit the target with it. So it was a sling and a stone. It wasn't a stretch it back, let it fly. It was a swing it around your head like roping, same basic concept. Turn one loose and let it fly. So he killed Goliath with a stone. He cut his head off with his own sword. He took Goliath's head 20 miles to the city of Jerusalem and set his head on a hill outside of the city, because the city was inhabited by Israel's enemies. Now, David knew that he was going to be king over Israel. He'd already been anointed. He went back out tending the sheep, doing his thing, shows up, kills Goliath. Saul's still king. David knows he's not king yet, but David knows what his purpose is. So David knows that when I'm king, first thing I'm doing is coming down here and conquering this city. And by the way, y'all, I just killed the biggest, ugliest, baddest dude y'all have, so I'm going to put his head on a stick outside the city so that all the city can look up there and see your champion's head on a stick. That's why it's called Golgotha, because it originally started out as Goliath. And the reason it's called the place of the skull is because that's where the skull was set, so that he could show it. 1,000 years later, Jesus is being crucified on the same hill, defeating the same type of evil enemy. Same thing. Prophesied all the way through the Bible, all the way from Genesis, about when God said that your seed shall bruise his head, and you talking to the serpent, and the serpent shall bruise his heel. We know now, based on exhumed bodies and stuff over in the Middle East, Roman crucifixion did not overlap feet in front of the body. They slapped the feet on either side of the cross and drove the nails right through the side of the heels. So we know on history that that's how they were doing this. They stretched him out. They drove nails through his wrist after they pulled him out with ropes, and they stretched him, nailed him to it, and then they drove from the side the nails through, one through each foot. So we know this is where all this happens, and it keeps pointing back to the same thing. When we keep on digging through here, through chapter 19, if we jump over to verse 28. After this, Jesus, knowing that all things were now accomplished, that the scripture might be fulfilled, said, I thirst. Now that's very important, because the whole time they've been offering him wine and gall and stuff to numb him while he's hanging up there, and he's been refusing. He's been taking it completely with no medication whatsoever. All right? Now, a vessel full of sour wine, but now he's asking for it. He said, I thirst. Now, a vessel full of sour wine was sitting there. They filled a sponge with sour wine, put it on hyssop, and put it to his mouth. So when Jesus had received the sour wine, he said, it is finished. And he bowed his head and gave up his spirit. If you want to research that, go back to Jeremiah chapter 31, verse 29, and you can read about how generational curses were compared to sour grapes, but the children's teeth were set on edge. So Jesus was getting rid of generational curses from father to children's and mothers to children's and so on and so forth and all that stuff. So if we're still locked into that mentality, it's not because Jesus didn't pay for it, it's because we're locked into it. There's a lot of things that were given by Jesus, given to us freely through sozo salvation. Sozo is a Greek word that encompasses everything from healing, forgiven, saved, made whole, delivered, so on and so forth. And it's over 100 times in the Bible. It's translated in all those different ways. It's translated healed. It's translated delivered. It's translated saved. It's translated to save. It's translated all these different ways because it encompasses so much more than just one little piece. But we, in our country, have locked it into thinking that I'm saved to go to heaven, so my sins are forgiven. But he saved you live here now. I mean, Galatians 1, chapter 1, verse 4 says that he died to deliver us from this present evil age. It doesn't say he died to take us to heaven. It said he died to deliver us from this present evil age. So if we try to withhold anything from what God's freely given to us, we effectively are saying that God values health more than he valued Jesus. And that just doesn't make any sense. I mean, God gave us Jesus. So what did he withhold when he gave us Jesus? He didn't give us health? No, he gave us health. If we want to walk in it, operate in it, be smart about it, use wisdom, and rely on him, absolutely. The Bible says that Jesus was made poor so that we could be made rich. He didn't give us to be made rich so that we could go out and waste it all on ourselves, but he did give us to be made rich so that we could help other people. That's what we do around here. You know, just because we're not all gathered up in here this morning, which I miss all of y'all, you know, a month into it, it feels like it's been a year. But just because we're not all gathered up in here this morning does not mean that we as a body still don't function and do. You know, we as a body, those that have, we give. Those that need, we give there. That's the way it's supposed to work. It comes through, goes back out. It should never be a closed door. So he gave us all these things for that purpose. So when we start to see all of the things that he gave to us, and we start to pick up on the little details of why did he do this, and why did he do this, and why did he do this, to fulfill all of these things, then we start to understand how little we've actually taken hold of the whole big picture. You know, and I want to take hold of more and more and more and more. I want to get more of it all the time. Because the more I understand what he did and why he did it, the more I'm able to walk in it. That's very important. If we jump over to John chapter 20, talks about the empty tomb. Now on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb early while it was still dark and saw that the stone had been taken away from the tomb. Then she ran and came to Simon Peter and to the other disciple whom Jesus loved, that's John referring to himself, and said to them, "They have taken away the Lord out of the tomb, and we do not know where they have laid him." Peter therefore went out and the other disciple and were going to the tomb. So they ran together, and the other disciple outran Peter. Makes sense for a young man to outrun an old man. Outran Peter and came to the tomb first. And he, stooping down and looking in, saw the linen cloths were lying there, yet did not go in. Makes sense for a young man to look down in, but be a little apprehensive about going in. Then Simon Peter came following him and went into the tomb. Peter, he wasn't as fast, obviously. John outran him, but Peter, he's pretty bold. He just strolled off in there, you know. When he saw the linen cloths lying there and the handkerchief that had been around his head, not lying with the linen cloths, but folded together and placed by itself. Then the other disciple who came to the tomb first went in also, and he saw and believed. So they walked in, they see, okay, we put him here. We hadn't got back to anoint his body with oil. We hadn't got back to use the spices and everything, all that type of stuff. They just laid him in there because it was a day of preparation before the high day. And now he's gone. Very important detail coming up. Skip over to verse 11. It says, "But Mary stood outside by the tomb weeping. As she wept, she stooped down and looked into the tomb. And when she saw two angels in white sitting, one at the head and the other at the feet, where the body of Jesus had lain. They said to her, 'Woman, why are you weeping?' She said, 'Because they have taken away my Lord, and I do not know where they have laid him.' Now when she had said this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there, but did not know it was Jesus. Jesus said to her, 'Woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you seeking?' She, supposing him to be the gardener, said to him, 'Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away.' Jesus said to her, 'Mary.' She turned and said to him, 'Rabboni.'" So she's really excited. She sees him. Jesus said to her, "Do not cling to me, for I have not ascended to my Father, but go to my brethren and say to them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, and to my God and your God." Mary Magdalene came and told the disciples all she had seen and the things that he had spoken to her. Next, we're going to see Jesus show up to the apostles. But when he shows up to the apostles, he's like, "Hey, Thomas, here's my hands. Here's my feet. Stick your hand in my side." There you go. He's hugging on the guys at his back. You know, why did he tell Mary, "Do not cling to me, for I have not yet ascended to my Father"? You can research that. but it's talking about Jesus going back to the mercy seat. And Dad, it's all done. It's all been completed. I descended down into the depths by your power, raised again, send it back up to you. Now I'm going to go back down, show myself to my brothers. I'll be back, and then we'll let them carry this deal on until we decide it's over. And when you say the word, I'll go back and we'll gather them all up and get them. So I hope that helps y'all a little bit this morning. I hope that gives you something to dig on this week. Like I said a couple times, if y'all need anything, we're always here. Maybe not here, but we're always around. You know, and everybody in this body has the ability and the wherewithal to help wherever needed. So fill some needs, help people out, be extra generous. If you're going through a drive-through, tip them. You know, those people are working hard trying to keep stuff going. We got a lot of people around us that are in a bind. Help them. You know, this is a great time to do that. And spend some time with your family. If you're out at the lake today, be careful. We love y'all. Nothing wrong with being at the lake. The lake's a great place to be. I've been a couple times already. I like the way Brad Paisley said it. He said, I'd rather be on the boat thinking about Jesus than I would be sitting in the church thinking about fishing. So it's a good spot to do some thinking. If y'all need anything, give us a call. We love y'all. Look forward to seeing you soon.